If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, roll call. Councilor Cody. Here. Councilor Kraft. Here. Councilor Rochelle. Here. Councilor Lunt. Here. Councilor Mason is excused tonight. She's not feeling well. Councilor Pomelo.
Here.
And Councilor Bowie is here. Okay, first item, please. Tyler.
We'll begin with the consent agenda, Order 2010-124, to approve the minutes of June 1, 2010, June 15, 2010, and a renewal vitulers license for Mark LaRoche doing business as Mark's Inc.
I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda orders as noted.
I have a motion from Councilor Pomelo and a second from Councilor Rochelle. All those in favor?
Order passed 6-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Under council orders, resolutions, and ordinances, Order 2010-125, street light ordinance.
We made the one change in...
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Guess you didn't get the right copy.
No, the copy I got in my packet said you didn't make the change. Because the change was on Section 7.
Section 7.
Right, 7.3, under general residential, and it still reads, a minimum spacing interval of approximately 220 feet or where feasible. And we were going to change that to be at
Minimum.
at spacing intervals of no less than 220 feet or where feasible. According to my notes from the last meeting.
At a minimum spacing interval of approximately 220.
No, that's the way it read the first time.
Oh, it didn't.
Here's
I changed the
first
language.
copy. Read the first copy. See my notes. No change.
No, it says approximately. I stuck the word minimum spacing
What
interval.
we asked for.
Not less
was
than, so I would say a minimum is the same as less than? Not less
a
than?
block location at spacing intervals of no less than 220 feet. So you're saying a minimum spacing interval of
It can't be any less, it can't, a minimum. The minimum spacing interval would be 220 feet, or where feasible.
But see, it says approximately, so approximately means it could be less than that. I mean, you're kind of contradicting
So
yourself.
you want
I
to
think,
take out approximately? That's what you
Well,
have.
Mr. Chairman, I think at the last council meeting, too, you wanted to delete the word feasible, where feasible, right?
Which, what?
You wanted to delete where feasible as well, right? Talked about that the
that's
last
not-
minute.
No, I didn't
in the
have that
minutes.
marked on my
That one.
copy, but I don't know if Lori has that or not
I
on her
don't think you have
copy.
the minutes, but
I
I
don't
finished
have it.
typing them.
Oh, yeah, as feasible. Yes, it was. I did have that
Okay.
crossed off.
Wanted to delete
You're right.
that.
You didn't read it. You left
Right.
it off again.
Right.
Okay.
No less than 220
So we'll
feet.
just,
So I think
It-
a mid-block locations at spacing intervals of no less
no
than
less than 220.
220 feet, given existing utility pole and light pole spacing.
Okay. My mistake.
That's all right.
We can still pass it.
We can still pass it with that, we just need to publish it with that language in there as a policy. And I think that was the only change we had identified to this particular ordinance, so I would entertain a motion to accept this ordinance as we have defined the modification to section 7.3.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Kraft,
I'll second that.
a second from Councilor Pomelo. Do I have any further discussion from council?
Have we seen the maps and stuff that are referred to in this document yet?
Yeah, you have a planning board meeting at the end of this month, and as soon as those are approved by them, they'll come before you, and then once you approve them, they'll be in the back of this.
Okay. Excellent.
And if we have to change, if things don't turn out the way it is, we'll change them here and bring it back to you as well.
Not putting the horse before the car, behind the cart here, are we?
No.
I don't think so. We're putting an ordinance in place and we're just finalizing the maps
That's it.
to support them.
Thing is, once you vote and agree to that,
But an ordinance can be changed anytime. So if the planning board comes through with something that they want changed based on the maps, or we decide when we look at it that we want to change it, because some of your changes on the maps may not impact any of the language within the document.
That's right.
But if you do make a change on the map that would impact language, then we'll just re-amend or re-modify the ordinance.
Kind of like the windmill, you gotta start somewhere.
Just for
Right.
clarification, though, I thought we said at the last meeting when we discussed this, the planning board had already looked at this draft and that they didn't have any
They-
recommendations.
They had looked at this draft of the ordinance.
Right.
Right, but we haven't processed through the mapping
The zoning changes.
changes for the lighting and everything. So, any further discussion? Comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote because this is a final passage.
Okay. Counselor Lunt?
Yes.
Counselor Palmwell?
Yes.
Counselor Cody?
Yes.
Counselor Crafts?
yes.
Counselor La Rochelle?
Yes.
Counselor Mason is absent. And Counselor Bowie?
Yay.
Order passed 6-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Order 2010-126, U.S. Department of Justice 2010 COPS Grant Application.
Okay, this item I brought back before council because I think we did an injustice to ourselves. We didn't pay attention to our packets and we didn't pay attention to what was going on. So I don't think we did a very good job. As myself as chairman, I don't think I did a good job because I didn't ask enough questions to have this put onto a consent agenda and us to pass that. Once I found out what this grant entailed, my original thought was this grant was just simply for radios and those types of things that come forward. When I was questioned by an individual and found out and did some research, this is actually hiring a resource. So I felt that, I don't think council understood that when they voted. I don't think we did our work, right? So we're all to blame here because we didn't ask the questions. We didn't even have the literature in our packet, so we didn't even ask, why isn't it there? So shame on us, right, for not doing that. But once I found that out, I felt obligated to bring it back before council and to readdress this. So this is a COPS grant, which actually is bringing on a resource that's funded 100% through the federal grant for 3 years.
3 years.
And then we are obligated, should we get awarded the grant? We're not even awarded the grant yet, right? It's been submitted, and we may or may not get it. But if we do get it, then we are obligated to hold that position for a 4th year under our municipal budget. So there's no cost to the town for the first 3 years, not knowing where we're going to be in that 4th year. We will still have to account for that resource for the 4th year. After that, everything is open for whatever happens. But should we get awarded the grant, we do have to keep the resource for 1 additional year. Most of our other grants that we've done this way have been funding for 2 years, and you keep them for their 3rd year. This is a grant that has a 3-year funding, and you keep it for the 4th year. And as you can see in your paperwork, if you've read through it, this was actually a grant that started in 2009. There was a number of agencies nationwide, because this is a nationwide grant. Only about 1,000 agencies were awarded out of the 7,000 that applied. And so now what's this grant in 2010, based on everybody who applied and did not get awarded a position, are the only ones that could reapply this year. Dale?
Question. So you hire a guy, you take the grant, you hire somebody. Next year, the state cuts back, who knows what. we're locked into, of not reducing the size of the police force at all, right?
Well, no, because I believe what you're locked into, and I wish the chief was here, but unfortunately he's on vacation, and the way this whole thing came up, but I didn't want to let it fester and go any additional length of time. But this money is funded 100%. So it's a revenue in and it's an expense out. So for the next 3 years, it's a net zero on our budget.
I don't think you understand my question. My question is this. You've hired an additional police officer.
Low man
okay?
on the pole.
Low man on the pole.
Low man on the pole, who you're hiring, in a sense.
Yeah, he would be the
Comes
lowest.
in at a basic rate.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that position has to be held. That's my understanding of it.
okay, so
You can't eliminate that position because you've committed to keeping that position.
can you hire this new low man on the pole and so you can't reduce anybody else?
And that's a good.
I think it locks you in so that if we get some really tough financial times coming ahead of us,
Well, locked in.
we're locked in. And
I can't answer that question. I
don't-
don't, I'm not
we
sure.
don't
I don't
know
know,
what the
I don't
future
know the answer to that
If you
question.
can't take a
without-
low man on the totem
And the other
pole,
thing is, we don't know 4 years from now.
Well, I don't know how grants work within the union agreement, from that standpoint. And it also would depend on what resources you were taking out of the police department, depending on where they were at.
Right.
Right, you could reduce non-union positions, right, still, to,
You could?
Yep.
absolutely, because, I mean, what we're getting tied around here in this is that when you bring this officer under the grant on to the municipal books, it would be a union position. So now, I don't know how much controlled this is as a union position based on it being funded by a grant. I don't know what things take place there. It could be that we can reduce, and you just have to keep that individual because that's the position funded by the grant.
I doubt it.
I doubt it too.
I don't know.
Why wouldn't everybody do that, Mike? That's
Well,
perfect thing. Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
No, you
We'll
could,
reduce a guy and we'll get the free
well, you
money.
can't have everybody do it because you have to be awarded the grant, and it's only if the federal government is passing out grant
I'm
money.
just saying, we win the award.
I mean, I'm not defending whether we should have them or not, I'm trying to explain it.
I know, but if we win the award,
Right.
okay, and we got a police officer, you're not going to convince me unless I see some more additional information that the federal government is going to allow you to get somebody else.
The federal government doesn't control the rest of our budget. The federal government
I'm talking
controls
about
this
an
one
officer.
position,
I'm talking about an officer.
but they don't control our officers. They only control this one officer.
Well, then why not take the money?
There's no guarantee that you can't just lay somebody else off, I think is what you're saying, Dale, right? You can't just get this free guy and then lay another guy off immediately.
I don't know what the rules are there. That's what I don't know.
Otherwise it'd be very
When
easy to
we get to the
exploit.
budget process, that fourth year, and say that the economy is still.
But we're not
intact,
talking the fourth year. We're not talking the fourth year. Dale's question is surrounded against, we get this position today, and
then next year-
and then next year, we've got to make this decision, and what Dale's trying to
Well, it would be like
understand.
any other process. We have to make recommendations and stay away from our officers on the street who are within the union, and if we decide to go to the police department to make those cuts. Again, it's going to come through the whole budget process like we always go through. Where are we going to make the cuts? Where can we make the cuts? And try to maintain our level of service.
But I think the question we're trying to get an answer to is,
Listen.
what
Like this at all.
what legalities are we stuck to based on having this position in-house on the books that would limit us, right? Because, I mean, Dale's got a very valid point, right? If we've got to make a decision next year, and if we've got to cut heads across the board in all departments for whatever reasons, I'm not saying we're going to have to, I don't want to scare anybody, but if we have to do something like that, the way this is currently defined to us would lead us to believe that we can't touch the police department, because you can't go get the lowest guy on the totem pole because he's covered by a grant. So therefore, I can't take anybody else out. So what we need to understand is, what are the rules and how does that impact us, and how the union contract is handled for bringing this position on? I think we need to understand that. If it's as we slated, I think council has one opinion. If it's something different than that, and there's a way, whether this would be good or bad, I don't know if we'd even want to do this, but if you keep this position and that position you hired, but then you're allowed to let the next lowest person go,
No brainer.
right, then,
We get the federal government.
right,
Is there any
But I'd be
possibility
surprised.
that they could say we would get the grant and then not fund the grant? After it was
No, the
already-
money's there. The money is there.
right, this is predefined, this isn't our state, this is the federal government, and it's
They
predefined,
own,
money, so-
they own the printing press, the state don't.
right, well, and, I mean, this is already money they have in their pockets, right? That's in a, like a
I think
reserve
it-
account for this type of stuff.
It's worth asking the question.
Oh, no,
because
absolutely.
We never know what's going to
Absolutely.
happen.
Absolutely.
We can bring it back on the 17th. You won't be here.
your other
Back.
department.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to be here.
That just goes against everything we
My-
do for the budget season.
My biggest issue was bringing this back to council because I don't think council was aware of what was going on, because I don't think we did our job, right? And so, shame on all of us for not doing that, but, I mean, if we want to wait and discuss it more with the chief and get some more legality answers, that's fine. I'm not going to be here on the 17th, but I'm not the only person in the world here, so, I mean.
Another thing too is that, another thing comes into play is that we cut Public Works, we cut all our other departments throughout the town, and then the police department can add positions through a grant. It just goes against the grain of everything that we've done.
Public Works, something
leave it
grant,
if
that'd be
they-
kind of nice, but, you know.
Yeah, you know, they could certainly use a grant.
I don't dispute any of that. That's why I brought it back to the table once I
don't
found
agree
out
with
what
any
was
of
it
that.
about.
Yeah, Mike?
Certainly.
It would be nice to find out is, say we actually, with the grant, hired Joe Smith, and for some reason, for the length of that grant, does that only apply if Joe Smith is hired, or if he was to go away, does that grant follow any additional, meaning that if you had 10 people in your force, do they always only fund the 11th person, whoever that may be? I mean, I'm just kind of curious if that...
It's that you're funding that extra position.
Right. I don't think it's tied to an individual's name.
It's more...
Because you can't guarantee that when we bring that individual on, that next year he decides he wants to go to Lewiston.
Yeah.
Right? And if he goes to Lewiston, he's done, but you've got the grant money, so you're able to fill that position for the remaining 2 years. You just got to keep it the next year.
But there is a number value, meaning that if you had 10 before you got this grant, you got to maintain 11. It wouldn't be the idea of, say, next year in the budget, he was to leave and we were to fund getting rid of 2 police officers, that this grant would fill in for one of them.
No.
Would it work that way?
I don't
I guess
know.
that's my question.
That's a good question.
You know what I mean? Do you have to
That's a good
maintain that
question.
one beyond, or can that, for the second and third year, maintain a position that would have been lost?
Right.
If that grant would have been there.
I don't know how that works. There's probably language in the actual writing of the grant and the stipulations, which we don't have, right, but I'm sure David does, that could answer some of those
I
questions.
guess my point would be is, say, next year, for some
Right.
reason, you would lose one of the resource officers at the school and not able to fund it. Would this grant be able to step in and fill that position if we got rid of somebody else?
Right, only if you, yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
Remember that.
If you were going to do the numbers game there, I don't know how that plays into effect here. I don't
Yeah.
think something like that can be done.
You wouldn't think so, but it'd be nice to know, that's all.
This is a job stimulus bill, grant.
This
okay?
is what?
A job stimulus grant. Okay, it's a great jobs.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll be shocked if they allow you to reduce any other numbers of officers and still keep this person. It defeats the whole purpose of it. It would give an incentive for every single town to apply for this grant,
They all
just to
did.
get the federal government.
They all did.
They all did, to get the federal government
Right.
to fund an officer. That's all.
Doesn't make sense, Dale?
The federal government don't make sense anyways, right?
Exactly.
And then the other
Nothing else
issue that I
makes sense,
have
so.
is, we don't know what 4 years is gonna bring.
Yeah, you don't know.
We don't know what
You
4
don't
years
know what's
is
gonna
bring.
happen the fourth
So
year.
to be locked into hiring another person in 4 years, when we look at these economic times we got out there,
Right.
it makes me a little nervous, but.
So I think what we should do, understanding this now, knowing we all have questions, is I would have been shocked if I brought this back to you and you guys said, oh, I knew what it was for and we were in favor of it, so.
I'll put it on
But-
the 17th.
I think we should bring this back again on the 17th when David's here.
Yeah.
Have a chance to get the answer to some of these things we've talked about today and give David a chance to help explain the details of how it works and all of that type of stuff. And then you guys can make a vote on it from there.
You
Maybe a
know,
copy of the actual grant language, I think that would help.
well, he needs to get a, David, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, same thing I think that Mark was going to say, without being inundated with paperwork, if
You
there...
might be.
I mean, if there is instructions, highlight information that could be
I'll get you some
abstracted to review, that would
Yep.
be helpful.
Make sure David has got heads up on it so he can be prepared.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
very
absolutely.
frustrated he couldn't be here tonight.
Well, yeah.
He was away, so.
He didn't like it when I told him what I was doing. But that's okay.
That's all right.
That's okay.
By the time this comes out, we may not get it anyway, so.
Right, I mean, we may not even get it, so it may be a moot point,
Yeah,
but
but the problem is, we may.
I think
Well,
we have to do our diligence, right?
Change, we just
And
tell them things
I guess
change
the other thing I
overnight.
want to emphasize, right, is, council, we have a job to do, right? And we didn't do our job, right? We all got to remember that
This
we
was not a
get,
good decision.
we get packets of information to review and go through, and it's our responsibility as the councilors of this town, and that's why people elected us, to do our job and be thorough at what we're doing. So, we can't be lax on things. We've got to make sure we're asking questions, and we've got to make sure we're looking at stuff. So it's important that we get our packets, we get them early, and we get through the data, and we review it so that we're prepared at these meetings.
Sure.
So we will move this item to the next agenda.
Okay.
Okay, next item, please.
Order 2010-127, Promotion Committee's Itinerant Vendor 12-Month Mass Gathering Permit Amendment.
There were some questions that arose during the Moxie Festival and then during the concerts in the park about vendors and health inspections and pulling permits with fees and stuff, and that's Twyla's forte, and I'm going to let her tell you the dilemma and what we need to do.
I just wanted to let you know that we adopted the Victular Ordinance in 1993 at a town meeting. Prior to that, we were governed by state statute, which had very little definition. I do recall a discussion that the previous selectmen had surrounding victuals licenses in Moxie Day, and it was my understanding that the selectmen required the health officer to inspect all the food vendors on Moxie Day, but that they intended licenses and fees to be waived, which has been the procedure for over a decade now. For clarification, perhaps the council should specify that they waive these requirements each year at renewal time. However, at this time, because we have a past practice, the Revitalization Group and Promotion Committee would like the council to do the same thing for their festivities this year, and they would like the council to amend their permit to include that privilege, if that's okay with you.
So in other words, any vendor can come in here without...
Well, I think it's more for mass gathering type things that are basically sponsored more by the
Festival.
town. Right, with, I mean, the whole Moxie thing is a whole town item, and now this, with all the revitalization that's going on and the economic efforts there, that's all basically sponsored by the town. So I think what they're referring to is the town-sponsored mass gathering efforts would be free from fees. However, I strongly agree that the health inspector needs to inspect everything and make sure, because we're having citizens of our community as well as outside of our community come in and participate in these things, and should they get sick or things not go well, right, that's not good PR for our municipality.
Not only that, but what would happen if we had a mass problem and made a bunch of people sick?
For instance,
Liable for that?
So,
For instance, the Promotion Committee currently has applications that they take for their vendors. So if you're part of the Concert in the Park series, you fill out an application with Rosie, you are then either granted permission or not based on their criteria on what they want in their festival. And then what we're asking for is if it's a food vendor, that we would like to not charge them an additional fee. This particular vendor at the Concert in the Park series is already paying a fee to the Promotion Committee. So we're asking that we not charge an additional $75 fee for food vending. But I hear that you would like to do the same thing they do at Moxie Day and ask the health inspector to inspect all food vendors.
Yep.
So we're really just concerned with our food
But
vendors.
is there a cost involved in having the food inspector check all this? That,
No, we already pay the health officer to perform all those functions within the town for all, I mean, restaurants and all the vendors that she's responsible for inspecting them, she can go visit you on a moment's notice, right, and just show up, and if you don't meet the criteria, has the right to shut you down.
And
How
she's
many
done that.
events
And she has done that.
How many events a year are we talking about here?
The only other ones we know about would be the October Festival and the Christmas lighting.
I mean, it's probably a handful or less, you know?
I mean, it's what, 8 concerts in the park, plus the
Seven
fest?
concerts in the park.
7, so I mean, you're probably looking at 8 to 10, maybe most, but...
Yeah. I mean, you're talking a handful of,
May I ask a question, Mike?
Sure.
Do you know if say if a vendor, like in the concert park, a food vendor, when they come into the town to get a permit, got to fill out a bunch of information as far as for liability insurance and all that, do you know if the application that this group has is as complete as what the town would be asking for? I realize that we don't want to charge us whatever the fee is again, but my concern wouldn't be so much the money as it is if the application is as adequate as is what the town would, proof of liability insurance, proof of, I mean, just, I mean,
The itinerant vendor mass gathering permit that you will give to the promotion committee gives them the right to hire or to monitor the vendor activity. So that's separate from the amendment that we're talking about, which is for food. So the amendment we're asking for is for food vendors to not have to pay another fee on top of it. An itinerant vendor selling crafts and selling their blankets or their homemade things would fall under the mass gathering, the itinerant vendor part. So what we're asking for is the vitular food part.
and I guess that's where my
be
question went,
exempt.
is, I mean, are we only looking at the fee, or are we actually looking at the application process itself? I mean, with what we're asking, I guess I just want to be clear on it, since Mike wants to make sure we ask questions, which is a good factor, is the idea of, when they fulfill an application to be a vendor at, say, the concerts in the park, are they filling out an application and paying a fee to the promotional committee, or, I mean, is it the same application and
Not the same.
requirements?
It's not the
as it would
same
be if they were coming to
application.
the town?
No, she does gather their information, their names, their phone numbers, and some stuff. It's not identical to ours.
But I mean, do
But it
they
could
meet
be
the
if
same
you-
requirements as liability insurance
The
and
health
all that type of
officer,
stuff?
when she inspects, wants to make sure that they have their state license and any other local permit that they would be required in any other facility. For instance, the guy that is currently doing the Concert in the Park series has his state license, and he has a local permit from Brunswick as well.
So our local health officer signs off on him, on his permit, before he's allowed to go in the park?
Her policy has always been they have to have a state license before she grants them the local.
Okay.
So I think she's going to be checking that.
Okay, I was just wondering, I mean, yeah, I know there's 2 different fees. If we were to get the application through them, and if they were to pay their fee for the concert and actually pay the fee to the town, they would be double dipping. I'm just making sure that they're meeting still the same requirements, that's all.
Would you prefer that they fill out the application and meet the health inspection? Is that what you're thinking?
I just hope through the process that they'd meet the same requirements as any vendor would for any participation in town, regardless of the concerts in the park or the promotional committee, that's all. I mean, if there's a certain criteria that we have for anybody that's going to sell food in town, the process to have to go through, I'm not really talking about the dollar figure, but more just the idea of the criteria, to make sure that we have all the information and, but
That
again,
would be
that's...
an appropriate amendment, sure.
But-
Yeah, we could do that.
Maybe it's not a big deal, but it just seems so for a concert in the park really shouldn't be any different than the idea of someone's going to sell hot dogs on the side of the road. To me, they ought to be meeting the same requirements, that's all. If that's what we're looking at tonight.
So the code enforcement office usually inspects underneath the itinerant vendor. And then, yeah, I think you can do that. I think you can just make it a requirement that they meet the local standards, waive the fee in the application process.
Part of that $75 we used to charge is the idea of the manpower of a code enforcement person to make sure that they meet the codes and again, I mean, it's just
It's
make sure we
important.
cover ourselves.
I think
that's
you're
all.
right. It is important that somebody make sure they have a fire extinguisher, or they're in a crowd, you're right. And somebody needs to make sure that their food service quality is up to standards. It makes
And
sense.
just, I mean, maybe they're all self-sufficient, but you would think that you'd hate to see a bunch of extension cords running across the park if it's raining out. I mean, just certain things that you wouldn't want to make sure is right, that's
So a code inspection and a health inspection should be required.
not
Although
dollars
the
in there.
code inspection probably isn't required on Moxie Day.
Yeah.
We do have an electrician available on the committee that checks it all out to make sure that it's appropriate.
I don't want to make any extra work. I just want to make sure that we're not skipping a avenue by trying to reduce the cost of the vendor, that's all.
You're certainly, I think, when I talked to MMA, they said certainly that you, as a council, have the right to waive any of the requirements for special events like these. So I would assume adding a condition is fine, too.
Would it make sense to have Rosie or somebody come in and explain what their process is for going through what the people have to fill out and what they look for and everything, to understand and maybe,
I can have her-
and maybe get, and so that they can get our understanding of the fact that, we think it's important that they're following the right codes and they're, protecting themselves and the citizens, and that we're, inspected health-wise correctly and stuff like that, and just have that kind of communication with them. And
I think that the information I saw she gathered was quite adequate. You could contact these individuals, you knew where they lived, you knew their phone numbers, you had their address, their names.
right, but what is it? I mean,
How different is it
how
from what you...
different is the what?
I'm only asking for a date of birth so that I can do a public background check if I
But
needed it.
when they apply for a permit,
Yeah.
they have to fill out an application. Is the application the same information
There's a-
requirement?
Pretty much the same except for a couple things. I asked that I need permission to do a public records check if I needed to, and I asked for dates of birth in order to do that.
And
Pretty
that's
much her
Otherwise, it's all the
application's the
same.
same. Very similar.
Yeah. Again, I didn't know without asking whether or not that we're
Yeah.
meeting the same requirements or not.
I thought it was the same.
So, yeah, I mean, we can.
I'll get you a copy of
Yeah.
both so you get to see.
Okay.
right.
So does that mean we want to move this to the next agenda too?
I'll put it in your packets. I mean, I don't think it's the same information. You're getting the name, the address, phone numbers. The only thing what else does Rosie ask for? She doesn't ask for date of birth, because we don't do background checks. You do that.
At times we do. It's not a requirement for a victualer's license, but if you needed it, you would have it on the,
So I would assume that if they have a state license, that means they meet all the liability, insurance, and all that stuff requirements, okay. Which is fine, I would just wanted to make sure that we're covering our bases, that's all.
I think we wanted to,
Tonight, just,
Huh?
we'll wait,
Yep.
we ought to waive that fee then, tonight.
Okay. All right. I would entertain a motion.
Move that.
I have a motion from Councilor Kraft to waive the mass gathering permit fee for the Promotions Committee's events
it's the victualer's fee.
and victuals.
It's a victualler fee that you're waiving.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Seconded, if I can ask a question.
Motion from Councilor Kraft, a second from Councilor Palumbo. Discussion?
Do we have a fee associated with doing a background check in the event that it was necessary?
Yep.
Is
It
the
would be 21.
$15, Or it's gone up to 21?
Yep, she already collects $50 though from the vendor
And
when
that's
they
what covers the
enter.
cost of doing that, if that's what you need to do? So we're not spending any money without, so if
Right.
we're waiving the fee, we're not actually losing money by doing that?
No.
Yeah, all right.
Well, and
Being the additional
just so you know, we're not
$75
doing
fee.
background checks for these.
We don't,
These, we don't do background checks.
for victualers.
Or
For victuals.
the.
For the
promotion
mass
committee.
gathering
Right.
permits that we're exempting the fees for, we don't do background checks. If somebody comes in for a regular victuals license or whatever, for Twyla to either open up a shop or sell coffee or whatever it may, she may go through a background check if she sees necessary.
But this fee is to waive, under the victualler ordinance, it says that all these vendors would have to be
Have to-
licensed under the
They
victualler.
have to pay the fee.
So we're saying we want to waive that fee
Okay.
under the victualler ordinance.
Gotcha.
Okay? Any other discussion, council? Comments from our public?
Who's
sleeping.
sleeping?
Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
6:04. Thank you.
Very good. Next item, please.
Is other business. A, fee schedule review.
I think I had mentioned to you before, some fee schedules from the state have changed, and so Twyla and I have discussed some of the changes that have to take place, and we thought that this would be a good opportunity for us to review all of our fee schedules, and Mike Cody, our code enforcement officer, put together some comparisons of other communities and how they're doing it. And I know back in 2007, I think you had made some minor changes in your fee schedule, but I think we have the time. It'd be a good opportunity to review all of our fee schedules and how we do things from the code enforcement perspective as well as here. I have supplied you with what our current schedule is, as well as some other comparisons for other towns. But this is just for you to review, and your chairman has asked me to put it in a different spreadsheet format so you can do comparisons. Lisbon, Lewiston, Auburn, Topsom, Brunswick, Durham. So we will redo that so you have an easy reading and comparisons.
Would we be looking to raise these fees?
That's really up to you.
Raise or lower, depending on what you think you need to do, or what we think we need based on what's in the surrounding communities, or we may not elect to do anything.
Yeah, you may leave it to
So what are you going to do, postpone this to another meeting?
Yeah, this is just an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we're not voting tonight, this is kind of just other business stuff, and what I recommended, Roger, was that we put together a little matrix. From down one side, you put all the different fees that are available, and then across the top, put the different municipalities we're comparing against. You know, we got Sabattis in here, we got Topsom, and then put what their current fee schedules are against ours. And then where the few are that we've got state-recommended changes, we'll identify those, and then we can look at those and say, well, we're within reason, we're not. Why is the difference? We may want to go do some additional follow-up work. Why some people are so high and we're so low, or why we're so high and people are so low, right? And trying, because we may want feedback from the various department heads based on what their fees currently are,
Outside of that,
to explain why the value is what it is. And then we could make a decision to change. So I would recommend that we might even end up with a workshop with this to kind of go
A lot of
through.
material to go over.
It's a lot of material.
Well, that's why I want to get it consolidated probably onto like 2 pieces of paper, you know, that you can see here and go through it. I think that would be a better use of our time
Yeah.
to review that.
This gives you an opportunity to at least start looking at what kind of areas we charge fees for and what we're charging, and it'll be a little bit more than one night process, so just to get you thinking. We'll probably take advantage of our workshop format that we'll do on our second meeting to utilize that time.
Yep.
Good.
Okay, next item?
Under B, Town Manager's Report.
In my report, I talked about the assessing and the evaluation that Bill Van Tynen has completed. If possible, I would like to schedule, if everybody can, next Tuesday for a workshop, so Mr. Van Tynen and Pat Dow can come and discuss with you the process he went through, how he got his numbers, what that they may look like, or what they will look like, and give you the options that we have that we can discuss and move forward and get letters out to some of the homeowners, businesses, and what have you. They've done a tremendous amount of work, but if that's okay, we'll schedule it for the 10th. Is early 6:30 a good start
I
now,
won't be able to do that.
the 10th?
You're not around the 10th?
My daughter's getting married. on
Oh,
Saturday.
well,
Family
I can't,
Going back to the airport, 2 different locations on Thursday. I'll be in Manchester, David will be in Portland. So.
Well, it would be, well, we could tape it, and I could make sure you get a copy of it, because I'm looking at, if we need to go back and discuss it more, we can do it on the 17th, which is your next meeting, and Mike won't be there.
what's the, could everybody do the Wednesday, August 11th? How does that hit your schedule, Fran?
That would be better for
The
me.
18th I can't, but the 11th I can.
Yep, 11's fine with me.
Maybe we could do it on just a workshop on the 11th, that way. I really think it's important to have as many of the councilors there as possible to make sure we understand this. I have asked Steve to put this in as elementary terms as possible so that we can understand it, because this can be very complicated, and
Is this workshop going to be open to the public?
Oh,
they can come, I won't let them speak. This is something we need to understand fully, and we need to get our arms around it before we have any discussion with anybody. I think that's very important, that we get our
I know
arms
this is a
around this
very
first.
volatile situation.
I understand it's a volatile situation, but I think we as counselors need to have the time to, I got no problem with the public coming and listening to our discussions and hear what we're talking about and everything. They can come talk to us afterwards with their concerns of what they heard or whatever, and then before we do anything, we can have it'll be, before we even set the tax rate, right, it'll be a regular item on our agenda to discuss. And depending on what council feels coming out of that discussion and understanding, if council feels we need to have a public hearing, we can try to have a public hearing before we actually go through the voting of that. But we also have to keep in mind that we're very pushed for time, because we have to set that tax rate before the end of August.
August 11th, at what time?
August 11th,
6:30?
if we could do 6:30, that would be good. Give us some time to do that.
Okay.
Great. I
Super.
appreciate that.
Thank you for the consideration.
Okay. Any questions on that?
And
And I'll try to get you some information ahead of time, but I don't, it's assessing and the whole process is very involved, and I don't want to overwhelm you with
Yep.
the technicalities of it. And even when Bill starts talking to me about it, there's times and I've been doing it for a while, but he's very.
So we all should come rested up so our eyes don't
Yeah,
glass
so
over.
Yeah, exactly. You're wide awake.
And could you
Lots of
contact
coffee.
Gina tomorrow?
Yes.
And let her know
I will
about
do.
this workshop so she can
So it's next
make sure
Wednesday.
it's.
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, yeah.
Okay, the Route 9, I know you've been following on that with Mr. Upham. Ryan is scheduled to meet with him tomorrow, along with I've asked the geologist, I told him that we're not going to contract with him to do all the wells, but we would like him to go up and stick a post in the ground where he thinks the best place would be. So he's meeting tomorrow with Ryan, and from that point, the people we've got quotes from on the well drilling, Ryan will meet with them and go with a low bidder. We've already received some, we just have to make sure that we all are in line with what needs to be done, and Mr. Upham's well will be drilled. We've been contacted by a few other people, so Ryan's dealing with that. On another note, Dale and I met with Senator Nutting, Representative Carey, about dealing with the state. I did hear, Dale, from Mr. Carey, that instead of getting the deputy commissioner, he got the commissioner, which we all know what that led to.
Oh, brother.
So we are trying a different avenue, but it's not looking very favorable, but we have not given up yet.
You mentioned you have several different directions to go in. Any idea what those are?
Well, if you don't mind,
Go ahead.
Senator Nutting suggested that our attorney look at some history of settlements with different towns on these situations to see how much the state participated in them same situations, which obviously has happened. And so Steve was going to look into that with,
And he's doing that.
he's doing that. Because if you've got a history of, 50% or 75%, and all of a sudden they want to give us 10%.
Right.
And we got a real good argument. We also, Senator Nutting and I are willing to put a bill in the legislature that would allow us to sue the state, because you have to actually get approval from the legislation to sue them. So we're willing to put that.
Think that's going to go over?
Probably not.
But we appreciate that.
That's draw attention
That's like
to
your
the
right
problem.
pocket suing the left pocket.
So we are,
Well, we gotta make them accountable.
Yeah,
we're working on that. It's a work in progress, as usual. But,
good.
so that's where we are. There's also, I got something today from AvCog, there's another federal bill coming out, in that we may be able to find some funding there, along with looking for money for a standpipe that was needed up there. So I've sent that off to Paul Adams, do you think this is something that we need to pursue? So we'll go from there.
Can we also communicate that to the commissioners
Yes. Yep.
so that they're into it? Because I'd like us to push that. If there's federal money out there, I don't want I don't want anybody wasting any time trying to go after it.
Right.
If we can have an opportunity to get something written and get it in there to benefit our community, I think we should do that, especially in this instance.
Yeah, I will do that. Usually I copy
I
that.
don't care if we have to be the lead even.
Yeah, that's fine, too. On somewhat of a note, that goes along with the water department is, goes with the sewer department, but Orem Adden, some of you may have seen the ad in Sunday's paper for looking for a sewer clerk. Ora has decided to retire, which is, she's got over 20-some-odd years with the community. We all were real sad, but she wants to spend time with her husband, and while they're both good and healthy, and it'll be a hard transition, so we put the ad out. We've already been receiving applications and resumes, some good ones, some not-so-good ones, but it closes next Friday, and we'll start the interview process. The goal is to get somebody on board either early September or mid-September, so we can cross-train, we can train them with Aura here, and we don't have to go out and bring Trio in if this person doesn't have Trio software experience, and we think that that would be the best way of handling it. So just so you know, that's one of the reasons the ad was there. Aura is retiring, and we're all sad, but happy for her at the same time. It's been great. Last week, Mike and myself, Twyla and Bill Stockmeyer, who's the bond attorney for the school, finalized and signed off on all the documentation for their $350,000 bond, and that went fairly smooth. Time Warner, this is something that statewide, most communities have been working without a franchise agreement, and it was something that we need to finish up. The state has a template, and Roger and I are looking at that, and we had scheduled a meeting with Mike Edgecombe, who's the vice president for Time Warner here in Maine, does all the governmental stuff, and he had an emergency, couldn't do it, but we're meeting on the 16th to see if we can come to an agreement and get this contract or franchise agreement behind us and finally done. It's been quite a few years, I think. Also, Roger, we had, cleaning up some loose ends, we had some charter amendments that we were looking at before, and we kind of put it aside through the budget process. Roger's question in mind is, do we want to go back and start addressing those so we can get them on the November ballot if we're going to make any changes? I think when we made the first 11 changes, we had something like 20-some-odd. We didn't want to do them all at once, overwhelm the public. Is that something that you want me to bring back to the agenda to start looking at?
My recommendation is let's move forward with this tax stuff first, because that's, I think, going to be pretty overwhelming for the next few months.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, that's my own, there's a lot of stuff I think that's going to be flowing out of that, and if we have to get it done by the end of August, which to me is pretty short notice for everything we're going to have to go through.
Yep.
'Cause
Okay, we'll get through that first, and then we'll...
That's only my opinion, I don't know, just,
We've got plenty on our plate, believe
yeah.
me. Taking that off and putting it on a back burner for a while. Also, the town needs to look at a policy for having people use town-owned property. We have an application that people fill out, but there really is no policy behind it. With this new gazebo, we had a couple come in on Monday and ask if they could use it to get married, even though it's not complete. And I went up and looked, it's pretty safe, so we signed off on it, but we probably should have some kind of town policy and people using town-owned property. So if that's okay, I'll start looking for some templates and draft up something. And let Roger take a look at it.
Is that the gazebo that is it the CBs or?
The CBs are working on it. It's
Working
almost
on it.
done.
Yeah.
big, it's huge.
They're doing, I tell you, they're doing a great job. I mean, I commend the VPs and the military, Navy guys up there, because they do a great job and they do a lot of work for us, and we really appreciate it, so.
Mark has been real good getting them into the MTM building and doing projects for us, and now this, and of course, one of them happens to be a resident, so he's really advocated for Lisbon. It's been really nice. He's really good for us. It'll be beautiful when it's all done. The roof is going on, I think, next week, and we'll almost be done. Marijuana dispensary. This we did, something to talk about. I'll bring you up to date on, we did have one of the people that have been approved by the state, the Smiled, S-M-A-L-E-S. That's their last name. They were approved to do something in some of the counties. The way I understand it is that the state would like to have maybe 12 different dispensaries throughout the state, and it'll all be state regulated. They have to go through a very thorough process in order to get that. We did have this couple look at Lisbon, and they were looking at the File Busters facility down on 196 where the Quonset hut and all that is. They were looking at that. They've been working with Mike Cody. They just have to follow our regular ordinances, but the packets they gave us went through all of the state security issues and stuff. But from what I read this morning, Lisbon was not mentioned. They're looking at Auburn, so maybe something has changed. But this was 2 weeks ago when they came in to talk to Mike. So I'm not sure if they're moving forward with looking at Lisbon or not. Question is, do you want to put a moratorium, which you can do, on this and give you an opportunity to draft an ordinance if you want to keep it from coming here, allow it, whatever you'd like to do, but Roger's recommendation is to vote that you'd like to put a moratorium on it and draft something so you have an ordinance. That's what a lot of communities are doing.
I would be in favor of doing that. I don't know about the rest of council.
I'm with you.
I think we need to specify somehow in zoning which zones are appropriate for it, rather than,
Or if it's appropriate at all,
We need
right.
to have a moratorium, so we can decide that and think about it, rather than just anywhere.
I'm in favor of that. I don't know about the rest of council. So
Need a motion.
I would entertain a motion to put a moratorium on the
Just marijuana, medical marijuana.
medical marijuana distribution facilities within the town of Lisbon.
That could put this town of Lisbon on the map.
Yeah.
Not that we want to be
And
that.
What, having one or putting out this moratorium?
So move.
I have a motion
Having
from,
one.
a motion from Councilor Kraft.
I'll second it.
I have a second from Councilor Pomelo. Any further discussion from council? Comments from the public?
Yeah, you needed to put a time limit, which I think the maximum is 60 days or 6 months. I don't know, I have to talk with Roger what, there's a certain limit. that you
Whatever the
have.
maximum is, let's just do the maximum, and then we'll have it.
Okay.
Good point, Mr. Fellows, thank you. So we'll put the maximum time limit on that moratorium.
Agreed.
Vote?
All,
Yeah, vote.
do we need to do a roll call for something like that, or should we do, no? All those in favor?
Order passed 6-0.
On another note, the auditor is in the building. They'll be here all this week. They're here, and they have another person doing the school. Occasionally, they finish up, so there's 3 people here. They should get most of their information by the end of the week. So the finance department's pretty busy, and everything looks okay so far.
When's the next meeting with the audit committee?
Kathy Tyson wanted to do something in October.
No, I thought she was supposed to meet with the audit committee in August sometime.
I have to check
I
with her
thought there was
schedule.
supposed to be a meeting in August. I don't have my paperwork in front of me, but
So I will
but they
check
were
with
supposed
her.
to meet with us just after they finished all their field work and everything.
Okay, I'll check with Jessica to find out what she has on her schedule. Okay, and that's all I have.
Okay, next item, please, Twyla.
Is under audience participation. At this time, those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward.
No audience participation? Okay, next item, please.
Order 2010-128, resignation, Planning Board, regular member Jerry Camke.
So, just so we all understand this, there's been some, Mr. Kemke can no longer participate as a full-time member, he's got other obligations. Mr. Fellows, who happens to be in the audience, is currently an alternate member, and they basically both have agreed to swap positions, but the way to do that is they each have to resign their positions, and then we each have to reappoint them.
Make a motion that we accept the resignation of Jerry?
I have a motion from Councilor LaRochelle.
I'll I'll second that.
A second from Counselor Palmerlo. Any discussion?
I just want to say that I've worked with Mr. Campkey on the planning board, and he was a great guy on the planning board. I think he really did a lot of good service for his town, and he'll be missed.
I'm glad he's going to stay on as an
I
alternative.
agree.
Yep.
but
Yep.
Sad that he can't be there as much as he could have been. We'll miss him.
Yes, we will. All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Next item.
Order 2010-129, resignation, Planning Board, Associate Member Don Fellows.
Make a motion that we accept the resignation of Mr. Don Fellows.
I'll second that.
I have a motion from Counselor Rochelle and a second from Counselor Palmerlo. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Next item, please.
Order 2010-130, Planning Board Alternate, Jerry Campkey.
I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion on this also, that we actually accept the alternative member of Jerry.
Second that?
I have a motion from Counselor Rochelle and a second from Counselor Lunt. All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
And then the next item?
Order 2010-131, Planning Board Regular Member Don Fellows.
And to move forward with that, I'd move forward with the motion to accept Don Fellows, planning board regular member.
I'll
Second
second
that.
that.
Got a motion from Counselor Rochelle and a second from Counselor Crafts. All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
You've been swapped. No.
We know that. But we appreciate you doing that, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, please.
Counselor Communications.
Counselor Communications. Do we have any council communications? Dale?
I went down to the concert in the park Sunday night, and it was awesome. Very impressed with the turnout. Ross Cunningham's doing an awesome job promoting it, and I'm going to estimate, I think there was at least 150 people there. What do you think?
They counted about 350.
Oh, well, see, that's my count, but
Yeah.
I was really impressed, and
In our own.
there was kids over, there was people over there on the volleyball playing, there was kids on the basketball playing, there was a bunch of parents with the kids on the swings in the playground, the concert was going on. I mean, it was really, really awesome. And Rick Graham,
Our own.
he is quite the talented musician. He's right up there stroking on his guitar and playing the harmonica at the same time and tapping his foot, and that's quite, doing a great job. He's got a great voice and quite impressive. I really enjoyed it. It was awesome.
It's on
That's our-
YouTube.
Next weekend, you should stop by if you haven't been there, but they're doing a great job. That's really very, very successful.
Great. Super. Vern?
Same thing, I stopped over and seen Dale, and it's amazing how that, you reminisce from that parking lot, from the idea when you
Yeah.
kid playing kickball to, in springtime, where the water would run down, you make dams, and it was just a mud fest, and to what it looks like today is something unique, and I think the nice setting of it is like Dale said, I mean, it's a beautiful park in the sense where there's something for everybody. There was people down low with their kids and playing ball, but the people in town that wanted to go, they didn't really want to go, could hang out by the monument and just kind of do their thing, but yet still get the atmosphere of it without actually being down involved. So, I mean, I think there was a little bit of atmosphere for everybody, which is really good, and hopefully the neighborhood around it appreciates it. I mean, I'm sure it's quite a change from the regular activities on a Sunday evening, but you see a lot of local neighborhood people there. So, I mean, I think if you enjoy it, I think it's a blessing. If not, hopefully they can bear with us and make it all work.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. Next item?
Executive session, Order 2010-132, to go into executive session per 1 MRSA, Section 405, 6C.
I entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
Motion.
I have a motion from Counselor Palmerlo. Do I have a second?
Second that?
Second from Counselor Lunt. All those in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Thank you very much. And we're in executive session.
Good night, Don.
See you, Don.